Good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to today's program with Krystal Ball, who joins us today from her studio in chilly Toronto. It's a beautiful day, but it's really cold. I'm Sarah Quinton. I'm the Curatorial Director at the Textile Museum of Canada, and we're absolutely thrilled to be working once again in partnership with BAND, Black Artists Network and Dialogue. Many thanks to Band Gallery and Cultural Center Director Karen Carter, who we just had a little sneak peek of earlier today. We're all excited. Karen, thank you for your high energy and your collaborative spirit. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Claudia Pensa-Bowen, your colleague, of course, who is the administrator at Band and co-curator of Krystal Ball, Darkness and Decadence, the exhibition we are here to discuss today. Lea Sanchez, who you also see on the screen with us, is our education and interpretation coordinator and is here to look after the behind the scenes details and to facilitate your questions. So please submit your questions at any time by typing into the Q&A box, and then Lea will facilitate those questions at the end of the session. We'll save them all to the end, and we'll make sure that there's time for your engagement in that way. I would like to begin today's program by acknowledging that the land on which the Textile Museum of Canada operates is on the traditional lands of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and it is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We're so very grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, which is where my home is located and where I am working from these days. I'm working from home a lot these days, so perhaps I'm feeling extra attached to this special acknowledgement. Through our activities, the Textile Museum seeks to create and grow a space for people to share, learn, and celebrate the textile practices of today, tomorrow, and long ago in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. It's a pleasure to introduce Krystal Ball, a Jamaican-born artist living in Toronto. I've had a few chats with Krystal over the last couple of weeks, and I have to say what a pleasure it is to meet a new and wonderful human being in these difficult times. Krystal began using painting and drawing as an outlet at a very tender age, and it grew into a lifelong passion which saw her winning multiple awards, including placing first in an international art competition held by the Pan American Health Organization at the age of 10. Krystal attended Moore College of Art and Design in Philadelphia, where she studied fine arts and spent many years after graduating volunteering her talent to social projects across the world. She represented Jamaica at an international level at the World Festival for Youth and Students, where she received a medal for her contributions to the festival from the President of Jamaica. Her work is included in the current group exhibition at Peel Art Gallery Museum in Brampton, Ontario, called When Night Stirred at Sea, Contemporary Caribbean Art, held in conjunction with the Sea Art Caribbean Art Fair. And this exhibition too was co-curated by Karen Carter. 2 years ago, Krystal decided to plant roots in Toronto, where she is establishing a very active practice as a professional artist. I'm so happy to be able to share with you that I had the opportunity to spend time with Krystal's solo exhibition at Band when it was on view. I think it was last November, seems like a long time ago, but I was there in November, and well, I can't tell you, A, how snowy that day was, but B, how warm it was inside your exhibition, Krystal. It was a very special experience. So what our format is, I would welcome Krystal now to spend 20 minutes or so with her slide talk, a prepared slide talk. And after that, she and I will have a conversation about that exhibition and the work in the exhibition, and a little bit about what's behind it, maybe what's in front of it, what's running through it. We'll try to bring in a lively conversation. And as I say, towards the end of that conversation, we'll also bring in your voices from the audiences. So Krystal, I welcome you to the podium.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, Sarah. It's an absolute pleasure, and I am just ready to jump into things. So I am talking about these, or are we doing a quick run through before, or we're just going to jump right into each
It's
piece?
up, however you would like to go, Krystal. You could go slide by slide if you wish. I think we have installation images towards the end.
Okay. All right. That's fine. All right. So this is a very comfortable talk. Uh, it's very laid back. It's not going to be one of those talks um, where I use a lot of words that it's hard to find a meaning for. So, just a very casual, friendly talk about this show because so this show was up at band, and I really wanted to focus on identity, especially being somebody who recently moved to Toronto. It has always been something that I noticed or held on to, especially because I travel and I interact with so many people from across the globe, but especially now deciding to settle in Toronto, I really was just excited to put out these pieces and really just get creative. Um, so this first piece is called Red Bones, and it is inspired by a lot of the pieces in the show have their roots in like the Jamaican influence because that is where I'm from. It's growing up in that society, you see a lot of classism, a lot of colorism. So this piece was inspired by the creme de la creme of the Jamaican woman, or what is perceived as the creme de la creme, where you have the nice hair, the nice skin, not too dark, um, and it's framed in this beautiful um, this background of, and it's supposed to symbolize this European influence of how what our beauty standards are and how we go about fitting women into these boxes and the implications of having those standards be what is viewed as acceptable within society. So I really wanted to highlight the extravagance of the culture, of what the richness of um, what is there for this person if you're able to fit in that category. So that is the inspiration behind Red Bones. Okay, so somewhere in the middle, this is a very interesting one because I find it funny. For example, people think of Jamaica, people think of people wearing locks, coconut trees, palm trees, beaches. It's what's stereotypically known. Um, but the image of dreadlocks is not universally accepted within the culture itself. So I really want to focus on that. If you notice, the pattern has changed in the fabric, and it's because I really wanted to capture that this is a modern thing. This is still going on to this day, where these people are not widely accepted in society, where you would have issues of in the past and even to this day where you cannot wear locks in certain, if you are to be in a certain job. You are not allowed to wear locks in school, and it is very, you're very monitored um, by this. So I really wanted to emphasize the intricacy of that that representation. Like, it is being used to market this place, but it is not accepted where it is supposed to belong. So I wanted to highlight that with the intricacy of the fabric itself. And if you notice, it's not as extravagant, or the embroidery is not as big and glamorous, and it's meant to be that way because of the fact that these people are stuck between trying to assimilate to a certain level, but constantly being put under because of their appearance or their background. So that is what sprung the idea for the title of Somewhere in the Middle, and the inspiration for using that specific type of fabric as well. I also decided to use it just to show like structure. It's the most structured piece so far in this entire um, series, because I wanted to show like it to be a representation of the society itself. Like there is this strict structure. It's not as natural where the other pieces have flowers or gems. It's more structured because of this rigid society and these rigid views that are surrounding these people's lives. Am I going too fast? Oh, this is a favorite. So this is the first I created for the series, um, Ambiguity, and it really means a lot because you you it gives you the idea of, at first glance, you're supposed to think of something that's in the front room, the great hopes. But if you look closely or spend more time um, looking at it, you will realize that the subject of the painting is actually an albino woman. She's not white, and it's supposed to give you this feeling of, the use of the color is supposed to be giving this feeling of hope. These people who are supposed to be seen as outcasts of society, that there is a place, they're worthy of being in this glamorous light. And what I really wanted to play on is the European influence within the fabric itself. So without having to blatantly say, okay, here is this is where this is coming from, you can convey that idea by just seeing the use of the fabric, by seeing the use of how she's dressed. So I really just wanted to focus on like her. So you have the fabric itself, and the fabric is supposed to tell a story, but I wanted the focal point of the entire piece to be the subject itself. So it gives the audience some time to just stop and look at that person. And you have to stop and spend time with it. Yeah. Okay. So this is a series of 3. I think this is the biggest one of them all. Um, so I grew up in a community where I went to school in one area and I lived in another area that wasn't perceived to be of high standards. Let's just put it that way. And it was so interesting to see that the difference of the lifestyle one, but especially being somebody who traveled, you'd meet people who would gravitate to like the Jamaican culture, the Caribbean culture. And to be honest, if you did it, like dig deep enough, you'll realize that that culture originates from the underbelly of society. So it's these women who are not perceived as acceptable, or the women who are pushing back against what society deems as ladylike or um, fit to be seen. And I think I really want to focus on that because these people create a culture that is widely accepted, widely marketed, it is refined, it is packaged, and it is used on an international scale for attracting people to the culture. But these faces are not the faces that you normally see when you, for example, as a tourist going to Jamaica. These are not the people that you're seeing. These are not the people that you're seeing in the ads. But these people are, as they would like to say, they add spice to the culture. So I really, really wanted to capture that. I'm very big on dancehall culture, not being in it per se, but admiring it for what it is and as a form of expression. So this series is a series of three, and it's three women who are known within the dancehall industry. They're dancers, they're regular people, but they're also um, carry this stigma with them because of what they choose to associate with. So I really wanted to, the point of this, these three, which you'll see the others next, is that I wanted to put these women who are seen as unacceptable on a background, on fabric that is viewed as beautiful. So it's pairing something unacceptable with something that is the standard, because anything European esque, anything um, originating of that European culture is viewed as acceptable. That's the standard. So I really wanted to compare the two, where you're put in a position where, yes, this person is, may not be your cup of tea. However, here they are on a background that you have been taught, have been conditioned, that is tradition. It's beautiful. It's it's the standard of what you're supposed to aim to be, and really give the audience a chance to focus on that character and see it for what it is. It's just a form of creativity.
Right.
So I, same with this one. I think it's the third in the series. Um, Same as another well-known dancer in Jamaican culture, and it's very interesting to see these characters because they go out at night looking completely different from how they look at their day jobs. But it's a lifestyle, and it's almost like a Cinderella story.
Huh.
And these people who, they're just looking for the next best thing. It's they're making the most of what they don't have, um, and just making it look seamless and flawless, and have it interject into the culture so easily. So I really wanted to highlight that with these three. Okay. So Whose Paradise, also a bit about identity.
Mhm.
Um, and it was inspired by a personal pet peeve of mine, which is going to the tourist resorts as a Jamaican and hearing the Jamaicans talk to the the tourists. And they'll go, yeah, man, and every Jamaican's just like, we don't talk like that. Please stop. Um, so it was diving into like with that knowledge and going abroad, I decided to take time off to just travel. Um, I had a lot of free time on my hands. I decided to volunteer. I decided to volunteer in Dominica after Hurricane Maria. And it was just such a learning experience because you learned so much about I was given the chance to learn so much about like the slave trade, what happened in the eastern end. But the thing is that Jamaica, well, the Caribbean is such a diverse community in terms of like the culture, the stories that are told. So a lot of things that are different, but yet if you dig deep enough, there is a root cause or a root story. So based off of my own research and the stories told to me by the older community in some of these countries, um, we found out about the Madras Fabric, which is a fabric that's throughout English Caribbean. A lot of these countries have as their cultural costume. And if you dig deep enough, you will realize that these costumes have origins within, like, it's very European in design, and it's trying to assimilate into that culture to be perceived as acceptable.
Mhm.
So the madras was actually worn by enslaved people on plantations, based off of my research. And these people were, and what is ironic is that that fabric is now being used in the tourism industry in Jamaica and is considered almost a uniform. Um, so I found it interesting that this fabric, which has a bit of controversy surrounding it, granted, there are people who accept the fabric and say, oh, well, this is something that our ancestors wore and they fashioned it to the best of their ability. Um, but it's just very interesting to see that in current day Jamaica, this is viewed as acceptable for um, people working for the people that looked like others that enslaved them before. In the shadows. So this one was inspired by my mother. Um, this is a very personal piece because growing up, I it was interesting to see like how colorism had affected my mother and those closest to me and people in my family, because my mother is black. She's of maroon background, which are the first free people in the Caribbean, the slaves that ran away from the plantation and settled and had their own village. Um, but it is not a culture that she openly embraces. And she, I remember her when I was growing up, she'd say things like, "Oh, you have such nice hair." So my father, who is Latina, Latino, um, he would have the nice hair and then or what is perceived to be nice hair. So she'd always compliment me on these things that, "Oh, you have your father's hair, you have your father's nose." And it was so interesting because she never saw her herself as a beauty standard, or, "Oh, I'm complimenting you by saying that, oh, you look like the furthest thing from me. You're not as dark as me," which is good because growing up, you'd have situations where, for example, the darkest one in the family is treated badly, and the one who is lighter than everyone else is treated well. And I got to see that firsthand and how it affected her. So it was interesting because I love her culture and her side of everything. I think my mother is very beautiful. I admire the same characteristics that she never saw beauty in. And I remember we had a conversation, and it was just me saying to her that, "I think you're beautiful. There's nothing, I don't see anything wrong with you. And I'm very proud of whatever features I got. Actually, I wish I got more." Like, if I had to choose, really, I would be very happy to choose your side. It was so mind-boggling. And I said it to her almost as a passing comment. It wasn't a deep conversation or anything like that. And I remember she came to me sometime after, like a really long time after, months, and she asked, "Were you being honest when you said this?" So I guess it really resonated with her because she has spent so much time like going unnoticed, or just being the strong Black woman that you're supposed to be. That's the label that you're given. So I really wanted to capture that moment. The same use of the European style fabric to show, hey, these are the views. This is why a person that looks like her would feel like they're in the shadows. But at the end of the day, there's still a lot of beauty. Um, I decided to use the lace as the border for it. If you look closely, it's actually in the shape of hearts, but I decided to turn them in just to show that it's a delicate situation. These people they're not bad people. It's something that we need to talk about. It's something that we need to approach delicately because a lot of these issues have been buried deep down over the years, and it's just going to take some time to really dig and facilitate a conversation about what is going on. Ooh. uh, m- my brother's keeper. This this one was inspired by my everything that's been happening recently. I really just wanted to um get it off my chest about all of the violence against Black bodies. You see so much in the paper. It's just been an overwhelming time, or it has been an overwhelming time, especially in the middle of a pandemic. And what I wanted to do was think about, okay, on a human level, really, I feel like what's needed most is compassion. Yes, we can have a conversation about all that is going on and try to fix the system and all that is broken, but at the end of the day, as a people, really, there just needs to be compassion within the community itself. So that was the inspiration. And those are my babies. That's the installation.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So I decided to include the same Madras fabric because of it's embedded in our culture, whether we want to accept it, we want to debate it, it is a big part of our culture. But something that's also a big part of our culture is sitting down for tea, which is
Got my teacup.
which is interesting because the Caribbean is such a hot place and it has become such a standard because it is what is proper. You get taught. I remember being enrolled in social graces classes just to know how to properly drink tea, properly sit at a table, and do all of these things that I'm just like it's way too hot for any of this. However, I still had to learn it. But it's it also brought back memories of just growing up and sitting down, having tea, having a conversation because you have to sit down and it's not like you can keep moving around. So it's a time to stop and have a conversation with the people around you. So this is what inspired this installation where I really just wanted people to stop and have a conversation. You have the bell, you call everyone in, you sit down, you facilitate a talk so that you can move forward, you can discuss whatever issues. Because the thing is that if you leave people long enough in silence, they will find something to talk about.
Hmm.
And that is what I found to be true. So I really wanted this to inspire people to have that conversation that's needed.
Wow. I forgot that I'm playing a role here because you transported me. Thank you. Thank you. I love those last images. Well, every single image I'm completely captivated by, but the last images of the installation itself, I think is really interesting. This exhibition did not get installed in a white box, modern formal gallery. It's installed in a space, in a house. It's in a house, and it feels right for this body of work. And one of the questions I have is, at what point did you know what this space would be? And did you make new work knowing that it would be installed in a domestic setting?
So I did find out where the location was and everything before. But to say I did it because of that location, not really. It really was just me at that point saying, hey, this is what I'd like to do. All things considered, I really just want to produce a body of work that really captures the idea of what I'm trying to say, and being true to the subjects or the people that I'm painting, the characters that the show is revolving around and the culture. So yes, that's really what it was about.
Mm-hmm. Mm. One of the reasons I ask is because of the beautiful fit of the content of your art and its installation in a house. I don't know if the house is Victorian, but it's close. Let's pretend it is for our purposes. And so there's an echo, isn't there? There's an echo of the content of your art, and maybe behind the white paint in the house, there might be some wallpaper that looks like the Victorian florals in
Mhm.
fabrics. To me, there was a tremendous resonance. And I'd like you to talk about that. And at the same time, the installation piece with the table, the two teacups, the Madras tablecloth, the invitation to take time. I love what you said about, if you leave two people alone long enough, they'll find something to talk about. um, and I think often good art itself is that conversation starter.
Mhm.
So I'm really interested in learning more about whether you will take that approach to installation into a next level at this point.
Um, so I think this is my second installation that I've ever done.
Ah,
Um, and I was really inspired to do the installation actually after I had seen the space. So
uh-huh.
if there's anything that really came from me just visiting Ban and seeing the space, is the idea of the installation, and making sure it's again staying true to what I'm trying to get across to the audience. Um, and you're absolutely right. It was very nice seeing the artwork in that space.
Mhm.
So, fun fact, I'm actually quite terrified of some types of galleries in terms of like this very sterile
Mhm.
white space. So it was very interesting to go into Ban and seeing all of like the character of the space. So yeah, the pieces worked very well, and I was also interested to see. So the first um, piece of work that I actually got to see in the space was ambiguity. And it's like, this looks nice. This looks really nice.
That'll do. I'm done.
So going from that, I had an idea that yes, this is, I wanted it to complement the space. However, I wasn't going to let that be something that prevented me from really expressing the point that I really wanted to get across.
Mhm. Mhm. I'd love to hear more about your research process as well, Krystal. Where do your fabrics come from? How do you source those materials that are so perfect? They so perfectly are manipulated. You know how to work your cloth. You know how to choose the cloth in the first place, but it's not easy to source materials, especially as specific as yours are. So how does that work for you?
So I got lucky in terms of, um, for some reason, even before I started incorporating fabric within my pieces, I collect fabric when I travel. I don't know why. I have a lot of fabric just sitting at home, especially back in Jamaica, where I travel. I get fabric and I bring it back. I don't know why I'm bringing it back with me, but I'm just like, I'm really drawn to this and I want to hold on to this piece of fabric. So it was interesting to finally see it being incorporated in my work.
Uh-huh.
In terms of like the madras, I have absolutely no like knowledge of where to source madras. I actually just sent my mother to the market and she was able to find the bandana fabric because the bandana is the madras that's used in Jamaica. She was able to source that. That was an adventure within itself because we had to go into the markets and go into the different places. Typically, you don't find these products, this material a lot unless it's around festival time. I don't know how she did it, but she did it. She's very grateful. Um, Also, again, traveling across the Caribbean, I had collected pieces of fabric from the countries that I went to because what sparked the interest in the Madras in the first place was going to um, a cultural event in Russia, and we all had to wear our cultural costumes, and it was over 90 countries there, everybody in their cultural costumes. And then when you saw everybody from the Caribbean lined up, you noticed that everybody was wearing a different version of the same fabric or a different color of the same fabric. So that's what sparked my interest in Madras. And I remember just going in, doing research, just doing a lot of reading, um, going to the libraries, finding books, finding papers that were written about it, and also just going to the various people, the older people within the communities, and having a conversation with them about like their views, what they think happened, because I feel like we often take for granted the stories that are around us and what we can actually make use of.
Right. So you're both a collector. You have a stash. You have a fabric stash.
I do. This
That's
is the first time I'll admit it openly.
I just outed you.
Yes, only my family knows because it's been growing for as long as I can remember. I've always just gone out and collected fabric.
Do you collect anything else other than fabric?
Not really. I
Yeah.
collect odd things. So it depends on where I go. Like I remember I went to the deepest lake in the world and it was frozen over. So I was standing there and I'm just like, okay, I need to remember this. And I picked up a stone and that's all that I took from that entire trip.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm not very big on collecting things in general. It's just when I see fabric and it looks or textile and it looks really good or it speaks to me in a certain way, I need to have it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when I will use it, but I'm sure the time will come along.
Mm-hmm. 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 I think I mean well let's talk about some of the fabrics that we saw in your artworks. You spoke about the more geometric as being more confined and restrictive, perhaps, in contrast to the floral roses, which are more, I'm going to say romantic. I'm not quite sure that
Mhm.
you use that
It
word.
is a romanticized culture, yes.
Right, right. Yeah, so it's a romantic, maybe an idealized culture as well, or symbol as well, but the lace, and then with your dance hall series, I think there's a beautiful tension there between, like I think you used the word underbelly, you know, between society's underbelly and what's proper, what's deemed as proper. What's deemed as proper is in fact quite, if we're talking about colonialism and white supremacy, it's the utmost of improper.
But the thing is that it's not viewed as such, especially, for example, within the Caribbean, where one of the things that bugged me the most is I did not understand why growing up I had to wear this very hot uniform to school that did not fit where I was, didn't fit my circumstances. And it wasn't until I was old enough to understand that it's not meant to fit your circumstance. It's meant to fit what the standard is. So it's just a chance to challenge those standards. Like, what is proper? Why are we still doing this with all the knowledge that we have, with all the experience that we have as a people, and with our own freedom? So what are we really telling others about us by how we're treating each other in our own community?
Huh. So you speak a lot about conversations and how important other people are, and cups of tea and time to talk and exchanging ideas and listening to other people. So I wonder, do you draw from live models? Are
Yes,
these
I do.
real people in your life? Let's hear about that.
Well, I wouldn't say that they are in my life per se, but they are people who you see them and you know them and you know what they do. Um, like I remember again being back in Jamaica, and you're in the dancehall itself, because dancehall in Jamaica and dancehall anywhere else in the entire world is very, very different. Um, and again, it was just very interesting to see the people who, like the woman who runs the corner shop, or the lady that comes and washes for little to no money during the week, trying to get food together for her family, and having them like put together anything that they have, coming out in their best, trying to look as good as possible, and bringing that presence of that grand presence with them, um, to come and show themselves in a party or just have that moment. It was really spectacular to see. So I wanted to highlight these people, especially because they're mothers, they're regular people with regular lives. Um, they're just a little bit spicier than everyone else.
A little bit spicier. You know, last year, Krystal, there was an article about your exhibition in the Toronto Star, right? And it was written by Deborah Dundas. And her review of your exhibition, I'm just reading a little bit now. Her review focuses on your critique of idealized feminine beauty, and you are critical on the one hand, and on the other hand, you're lifting up. Is how I understand. In the article, you were quoted as saying the following, although it's funny to quote you when you're right here, but bear with me, bear with me. You said that the show is meant to tackle the whitewashing of beauty standards, hypersexualization and marginalization of Black voices in a predominantly Black country. So that in itself is a huge tension, isn't it? You know?
It is. It
Yeah,
is.
yeah. I think
Um,
strong language from you.
I mean, it might as well be strong language because it's like it's already happening. It is what it is at this point. And um it's something that needs to be talked about. We're facilitating conversation.
Uh-huh,
As much as some conversation is going to be hard or uncomfortable,
uh-huh.
or we have them, these conversations, the easier it will become. Um, and I really just wanted to highlight the fact that this is happening. A lot of people outside looking in would never assume that something like that is happening in a predominantly Black space. You have people who you see every day. This is your norm. Your leaders are, they look like you. You have this community, and it's not just Black on one spectrum. It's a broad spectrum. It's not just including, oh, the very, very dark person. um, each category has um, its own struggles, but it's important for that conversation to be facilitated. How these people being treated, um, how does class come into play, how are they being affected by these standards? So I really want to start that conversation. It's not something that's heavily spoken about within, especially not in the Jamaican community, um, because it just is what it is. You have, and it's so ingrained because you had, for example, the National Secretary Award back in the day, and everybody, you couldn't get a job as a secretary unless you were of a certain complexion or had a certain hair type, um, and there was a best leg category. And I'm just like, I don't understand what that has to do with being a secretary per se. Um, so all of these things are so ingrained in the culture, and I really wanted to have a conversation about that. And also, you have this double standard for like people within the dancehall culture itself, where okay, this woman doesn't deserve basic human um, requirements or things because she's behaving too sexually. She the person she chooses to portray on the weekends is a bit too sexual. So I don't think this person deserves justice for domestic abuse. So there are all these underlying issues that I really just want a conversation to start about so that we can move forward in the direction to actually addressing slash fixing them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I think the images and the way you make those images are provocative. They do provoke. Uh, they provoke conversation. That's what you're talking about. Um, and no, please.
No, I'm saying that's the aim, to
Yeah,
provoke
yeah,
conversation.
yeah, 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 yeah. I think I'm curious too. You know, you've traveled a lot. You told me we were talking about the weather before we started our program, and you said it's okay, Sarah. I went to Siberia, and so I wonder. You're home. Jamaica is a tourist destination. You talk about that quite a lot. It's an enormous part of the country's economy. But as you have traveled the world, I wonder how that turns your own experience of being from a strong tourist economy, and then you become a tourist as you travel. Um, maybe you can talk about that role reversal a little bit.
So I feel like traveling. has broadened my own sense, because I was one of those people who I'm just like, I need to leave here as soon as I possibly can while living in Jamaica. And that's typically the idea because anything other than being in Jamaica, granted, nobody wants to go to the rest of the Caribbean. That's not the type of leave we mean. It's usually people from the Caribbean migrating to the UK, Canada, the US, because this is what is viewed as um, what's glamorous, or you've made it if you've gone to these places. But
Mm.
for me, it was more of a sense of I I am in a tiny space and I just need to get a different scenery. I've been here my entire life. So at the age of 17, I packed up and I moved on my own to the US, um, to attend college. And it was during that time in college, learning about art, learning about the history, going to museums. That was the first time in my life I've ever been into a museum that was bigger than what I was used to, which is not that big back home. And it made such an impression on me. And the thing that really dawned on me the most is that here I am in a different space, soaking up a different culture, and I'm enjoying it. And I know nothing about my own backyard. I don't know
Ah,
anything about the culture of my own country. I don't know anything. And that gave me like a really strong um, eagerness to go home, learn, which is why I ended up taking the time to, for example, traveling across the Caribbean. That's not something that people from the Caribbean end up doing, especially after being able to leave. You normally don't take the time to do that afterwards. But I really wanted to know what was there, um, what kind of culture um, is available, or what did the people there build before me. Um, so it was interesting traveling and meeting all these people and hearing their interpretation of what I'm supposed to be and what the people of my country are supposed to be like compared to what it actually is. Because I've made so many friends and invited them back home, and they're just like, oh well, we went, or we're afraid to go,
mhm.
and or we went and we just stayed in the hotel, and they told us that we can't leave or else we're going to get shot, or which is not true. And having to then um, visit with these friends, having them experience what I took the time to learn, to appreciate, and bringing them along and saying, hey, here are these things that you probably didn't know, and having that changed interpretation of what a space is. So it's very interesting to know what their experiences were coming into the country,
Mhm.
and just my, because even traveling across the Caribbean, I feel like there were a lot of things that I was expected to know that I did not know and had to take the time to learn. But it's just because it's the Caribbean, it is so, it's like everybody else is living in their own bubble, even though it's such a small space and everyone is so close. Um, so yeah, it was just very interesting to have that interaction and see your own identity through somebody else's eyes, depending on where you are and what that person believes that they know.
It brings me back to one of the things that you said in that Toronto Star article is if we can examine notions of beauty critically, and if we can question our own ideals, we can also look at the world and ask, is this world beautiful? Is this what I want it to be? And who do I want to be in it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I believe heavily in not comparing. You don't need to compare something to something else in order to see that thing's beauty.
Mm-hmm.
You're not comparing, oh, well, this fish isn't as beautiful as this dog because it doesn't have hair, or there isn't that, you don't need that cross reference. You can just sit and appreciate something for what it actually is, and the qualities of that specific, whether it be object or person, and just give it a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the what I'm getting at, where you give people a chance to be themselves, see them as, okay, Sarah is Sarah. I'm going to look at Sarah as Sarah and nobody else, not comparing her. What is this person's, what drives this person? What makes this person tick? What makes this person who they are? Why do they choose to do what they do? And because you will have that moment to sit with that person, you get a chance to kind of peel away the layers and have a deeper discussion about um, coming to a level of understanding,
Mm-hmm.
facilitating tolerance, facilitating just having people be comfortable in their own space. And I feel like with that opening that channel of communication brings so much more across than trying to have people measure up against a certain standard or be something in order to gain basic things like respect. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like those are basic things that should be facilitated regardless of how anybody looks.
Thank you. Thank you, Krystal. We have a question from the audience. I think I'm going to share it with you. And then I'll have another, I could go on forever, but I think I'll save it to one more question for myself after this. And the audience question, Krystal, is I would love to learn why Krystal chose to settle in Toronto after traveling so much.
For several reasons. One, because Toronto is very multicultural. I have been able to stay in Canada without having to really, I still miss traveling, but I feel like Canada is just such a big space with so many people from so many different places. So even a lot of the cultural experiences that I've had in Canada, and just meeting people from different ethnicities, different backgrounds, hearing their stories. It's always so interesting if you just stop somebody and ask, "Oh, okay, how did you end up here?" And have that conversation. You will often find some very interesting answers. Or how did your parents end up here? It's so I fell in love. I fell in love, and it's also nice that I'm not that far from going far from Jamaica. So if I need to
Yeah, yeah,
Jamaica, I can.
yeah.
Also, I came here in the summer. I think that probably what got me. The first time I came here was in the summer. I was like, oh, this is nice. And everybody's just like, oh, it gets pretty cold in the winter. I'm just like, oh, it can't be that bad. And I remember being here through, I think I've been told one of the worst winters. And I'm just like, if I can survive this, I'm sure I'm fine. But I do think that Toronto is a beautiful space with beautiful people. And it's so interesting because it makes for very interesting art, very interesting exposure without having to leave. You
Right.
can go into a cultural space and start a conversation, and you can still learn so much. So I fell in love with Toronto for a lot of reasons.
So what you just said then leads beautifully into my next question, which I learned today that this is only your second solo exhibition. I had no idea. Of course, I knew that you're an emerging artist. Um, you've also been in several group exhibitions. I know this. So my question has to do with the newness of many things in your life right now, your new relative newness to living here,
Mhm.
your relative newness to exhibiting your art, not to making it, because we know that you've been making art pretty much your whole life, one
Pretty
way,
much.
pretty much. um, so the question is a big one, which is what's next? It's one of the easiest questions to ask an artist and one of the hardest questions to answer. So, but I'm going to do it anyway, Krystal. How can you talk about what has come out of Darkness and Decadence for you? What has come out of your work with Sea Art recently? What has come out of your involvement in this the current large group exhibition that will influence your studio practice? How can you talk about that and your aspirations?
So being in a new space, it is nice to have things at my disposal that I didn't have before,
Mm.
especially being somebody who traveled, for example. It was always easier to, for example, work on canvas, work on smaller pieces. So I can just roll them up, put them in a canister and be about my way, just to make moving easier. So it is very nice for like to be still.
Mm.
Um, so I'm taking the opportunity, especially now with the pandemic, to just really focus on working, putting out work, experimenting, because this is very exciting for me now, um, especially being amongst so many different cultures. So right now, I'm really focused on doing research, because it is important also to learn about whatever it is that you're trying to represent or you're trying to bring across to your audience, and so that you can do it in a very authentic way. So taking the time to do research. There is also the fact that um, when Night Stirred at Sea is going to move on to the McLaren.
Yes.
Yes. So that is very exciting. So I'm working on pieces for that as well. Um, yeah, and I'm really just trying to learn the space, do my due diligence, um, especially in terms of learning about um, the culture of the space that I am in,
Mhm.
and just trying to put out new work.
That's a beautiful lead in to a new question that came in, so I'm going to share that. The question is, Krystal, how does it feel for you to be identified as an artist in Canada? What was your struggle to be recognized?
How do I feel? So I feel, I'm going to be very honest about this. I do not feel like labeling is my job. So if I enter the space and I state what is true for me, which is that, hey, this is my story. And yes, I am now based in Canada. So it's not, it doesn't really bother me. Hold on, I'm trying to find it. So it doesn't really bother me as much or at all actually, to be identified as anything. I feel like that is the responsibility of whoever is trying to identify me. I try, as long as I know what it is that I'm doing, that is fine. My struggle to be recognized. I have a belief that as long as you keep working at whatever it is that you want, eventually it will come to you. And just to keep putting out the efforts, putting out your work, being firm in what you believe, and staying true to what it is that you would like to see get done. I really didn't view any part of the process as a struggle. It was more, okay, all right, here is this obstacle. How do I get around it? What do I need to do in order to get to the next point of where I'd like to be? So I just kept at it. And as I said, again, I believe in conversation.
Yeah.
So there is nothing wrong with just going up, going to the spaces that you'd like to be in and starting a conversation. It's not a space that you belong in, you're probably not going to end up there, and just keep it going.
You're a researcher and you're very practical all at the same time. All at the
I
same
try.
Thank you, Krystal. I feel compelled to share with everybody that I expressed uncertainty about whether or not the band building, the house that band is housed in, is Victorian or not. And Karen Carter has kindly confirmed that indeed, yes, it is a Victorian home. So that I think is a beautiful way to wrap up the synchronicity between your work and it being looked after, finding a home at band, certainly for the moment, and already we're seeing that your home is growing from the galleries at band into a community, an international community. And as far as conversations go, Krystal, yes, I can confirm you're a great conversationalist.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you so very much. I want to thank Claudia from band. I want to thank Karen from band. I want to thank all of our people who have joined us for the last hour or so. And most important, Krystal, thank you to you for your generosity, your openness, and your art, which will continue to generate conversation. I have no doubt, and I can't wait to see what's next. So you'll keep us all in touch and informed. Look after yourselves. Thank you, everybody, and talk to each other.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.